Hello everyone, welcome to Chasing a Murder, and today we are on part 99 of Life Beyond the Grave, which is attached to the Lori Vallow case. We are in the part of the timeline where Lori Vallow is starting to call these dark entities she claims that are taking over people's bodies, like her husband Charles Vallow, zombies. And I want to share a few testimonies that recently went through trial by Melenie Gibb and Zulema. They will describe for us, at least partially, not very much, of how they will start doing castings in order to eliminate the zombie from Lori Vallow's husband, Charles Vallow. According to them, they are following the doctrines of Joseph Smith, the Mormon religion, but a lot of people are saying that is not the case. That a lot of the stuff that Lori and Chad are teaching in this time frame have nothing to do with the LDS. We have learned that Lori had met Chad at a conference in Utah. So had many other women like Melenie Gibb, Aubrey, several more. Lori had manipulated her way into his life by playing basketball, kind of shoving other women away, and using dance videos to lure him in. Lori had seduced Chad Daybell. They had got married in the temple. Now, according to Melenie Gibb, Lori Vallow's husband, Charles Vallow, is now a full-blown zombie. So we're going to hop around a little bit. Like I said before, it's hard to tell this in exact order, but sometimes we kind of need to refresh ourselves anyway. This story is huge. Lori doesn't just gather friends. She's trying to gather her family members. She's testing them, and she's finding out that not all of them are going to support her. This is where it gets kind of creepy, because her mother and her sister support her somewhat, but her brother Adam does not. Adam Cox believes that Lori Vallow is not a prophet, and this puts him in danger. At this point, Lori will start kind of shunning away people, including her family members, that are not following the path she lays. There are consequences when you do not follow in line. We will also begin with the testimony of Melenie Gibb in the summer of 2023 for the Lori Vallow trial. Melenie gives us a very tiny glimpse of the truth. We could have received more, but she was very careful not to share too much. Like zombies, people who become dark and unforgivable ranking systems, and Lori had the power to determine who was a zombie. We know that Lori felt as though several of her family members were dark, and it was the ones that didn't follow her path, and that her husband was once dark and then evolved into a zombie. Again, a zombie is a person whose spirit has died and vacated the body, in which an evil spirit or demon has taken over. According to this testimony by Melenie Gibb and Zulema, Lori believes that her husband Charles is a zombie. His body has been invaded by Ned Snyder, but since has left his body where he was invaded by another called Garrett. Now remember, Lori claims that she is part of this great church that is preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ, the 144,000. Not only does she think she's part of that, she is a leader.
So if someone were to be the head of that 144,000, would that be a pretty high calling?
Absolutely.
Would that be a position of pretty significant power?
Yes.
And when you talk about they may have shared this with their inner circle or their close friends, do you know who that would have included for them?
Yes. It would have included Zulema, Dennis, Serena Sharp, Christina Atwood, Nicole, forgot her last name, Melanie Pulowski, and I believe she told her sister later on, and I don't know how much she shared with her family. I believe that's, and Alex, sorry, Alex. I don't believe, well, let's see.
Do you recall approximately when Lori started talking about being part of the 144,000 or the head of the 144,000?
Right when I met her.
And then I think, so, and I guess
That is important to note because she says it was the day that she met her. How interesting is that? So did Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow have a lot more in common than Melanie would lead you to believe, especially with the Church of the Firstborn and End Days.
so she first starts talking about being part of the 144,000 when you first meet her. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And then I think you'd already indicated after she met Chad, she indicated that she and Chad were the heads of the 144,000 or the leaders.
Correct.
Do you recall approximately how long after meeting Chad she started telling you that?
Within weeks, probably.
According to Melanie Gibb, Lori Vallow immediately mentioned 144,000 the day that she met her, and after her and Lori and Chad met, it was only 2 weeks, and they both considered themselves to be leaders of the 144. It was nearly immediately that Lori and Chad were able to hit it off, and they both realized they had the same understanding of Christ, his second coming. Interestingly, they accept and soak in each other's out-of-the-box ideas. Next, Melanie Gibb will mention the ranking system of light and dark. This is a big, huge part of this and topic. They're not the only ones that are kind of ranking things based off of light and dark or probations. Remember the mortal probations or multiple lives. Now remember, Julie Rowe is very big on the energy code, and she's kind of mixing in that with her religion, which the leaders of the LDS, they're not happy about. And Chad often asks Julie questions on how this ranking works. And I can tell you that he does get a few ideas from Julie, but he turns it into something completely different. So let me share what Melanie Gibb says about the ranking system that they have. And then later we will play Julie Rowe and Eric Smith, a clip of their podcast where they explain what the ranking system means for them, because it means two different things. But you can see where Chad is kind of taking other people's ideas along with his lover, Lori Vallow, and manipulating these ideas to be their own. So they're putting their own spin of things into this.
Do you recall Lori ever telling you about a light and dark scale?
Yes,
Did she ever explain to you what the light and dark scale was?
she did.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
She told me that people that were light were people that before they came to this planet, when we lived in a pre-mortal realm, basically our spirits lived there before we physically came here, that those that signed contracts and made agreements with the Savior were light, and those that were dark were those that signed contracts with Satan.
So, before you were born here on this earth or another planet, maybe in another universe or multi-universe, perhaps maybe another dimension, you had signed a contract with either the light or the dark, the light being of God and the dark with Satan. This is where they say the teaching's different between the parties here involved. Other people that support this system say that no, there's no absolute of being born on earth as just a light being or just a dark being and not being able to go back and forth between the two.
Do you recall when she first started telling you about light and dark, the light and dark scale?
It was sometime after she met Chad, that few weeks when she met him. I would say probably pretty immediate. It feels like it was like it could have been possibly that weekend or just days after that, after she met him.
And when she would tell you these things, would she also essentially be teaching you about this?
Correct.
Did you observe her teaching any other people these things?
Yes.
And do you recall who else you observed her teach these things to?
I saw her teach them to the girls that I mentioned earlier, her brother, and just a few other friends that I did a podcast with.
Did teachings about light and dark evolve over time?
They did.
What else did Lori end up telling you regarding someone that was dark?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
What else did Lori tell you regarding someone that was dark?
At first it was, they were working under the contract of Satan, and so they were more on that dark side, and it would change, often more and more, but
could someone switch from being light to dark or dark to light?
I believe so. I believe that's my memory, yes.
So Melanie mentions the fact that they can switch back and forth. Well, that's not the case as it progresses, is what we're hearing. We've heard several people say they can go back and forth from light to dark. We'll see texts between Lori and Chad that insinuate that. We think they just say that because they're making people believe something that's not true. I think once they make up their mind that you're dark forever. And you have now been a target. And you'll learn more why I say that as we move forward.
Did Lori ever tell you anything with regard to an individual being possessed?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
So my first experience with her sharing that with me was...
You will notice here that Melanie Gibb is struggling to tell the truth. And it's so sad.
In the January time of 2019. And she first started telling me she was in the backyard of her house. She came in and she started sharing all the information she just heard from Chad. Chad let her know that Charles Vallow was taken over by an evil spirit. And that was the first time she had heard of it. And then, that made him dark, according to them.
Did Lori talk to you about a dream she had had?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding a dream she had around that time?
So she shared with me that Charles was getting ready to go to Texas, and I don't know if he was there already, but that she had saw him in a car accident. I believe JJ might have been with him in the car accident, but that he died in it. And so he would not be coming back home by January 1st.
And do you know if JJ was with Charles during that time?
He was.
And do you know if JJ would have been traveling back with Charles?
Yes, he was.
So here we are, we're flipping back and forth a little bit, and you can hear her testify that it was around the 1st of January, only 2 months after they met, that Lori's talking about the fact that Charles and JJ may die in a car accident.
Do you know if Charles was in an accident at that time?
He was not.
Did you ever talk to Lori about the fact Charles was not in an accident?
Yes, I did.
What did she tell you regarding that?
I asked her what happened. You shared that you thought he was going to pass away. And she said he didn't because Satan interfered with the plan.
Now, I found that part of the testimony very, very intriguing. And the reason for that is her reasoning for why Charles and JJ didn't die in a car accident. Satan had interfered and stopped it from happening. So, does that make Satan a hero? I'm not quite certain what Melenie Gibb is trying to say by saying that. So Satan is always after Lori. So the only way I can take it is they had planned to do something, but Satan messed it up. If those are the exact words that come out of Lori Vallow's mouth, it is a very interesting comment for me.
And when she talked about the plan, did she tell you whose plan it was?
So she would talk about just from her own experiences. Often she would either have what she would call revelation about different experiences with Charles, or maybe she would also talk about her experiences with Chad and how they envisioned getting together, that their spouses would pass away. So that was the plan that was revealed to them. They believed that their spouses would pass away.
With the idea being that once their spouses passed away, they could be together?
Correct.
Based on what Lori was telling you, was it your understanding as well, because Charles was dark, he would need to pass away?
Correct.
Do you recall Lori ever talking to you about castings?
Yes.
What did she tell you regarding castings?
So she would say that she was trying to understand how to get these evil spirits out. And so her attempt to do that was to have like a prayer where she would, like you maybe would read from the scriptures, where you would try to encourage the spirit to come out by the power of God.
Did you ever participate in any castings or observe them?
Yes.
Do you recall when that would have been? Approximate, if you can remember.
Probably January, February 2019 is when, after, she learned that Charles was dark. So sometime after that.
And I apologize because you may have already said this, but was Charles the first individual that you ever heard Lori call dark?
Yes.
Do you recall where that casting would have taken place?
The first time I recall was at Zulema's house.
Do you recall who was present for that?
Lori, Zulema, Christina, Nicole, Serena, and me.
And those are some of the same individuals you'd previously mentioned, is that correct?
Yes.
And you talked about castings being kind of a prayer. Was there any other element to the castings?
I guess so. It was definitely out of context for what I would, see anybody talk about on a spiritual level in any religion. But they would use terminology that to me sounded kind of like energy work. And so they would try to share words like disconnect their cords, like a cord was something you connect your spirit to your body, something like that.
So who do we know that does energy work? Well, there's several people that were actually involved with the preparing of people that did energy work. There were several people. But we know that Chad was closest to Julie Rowe. We also know that Lori Vallow watched a lot of Julie Rowe's podcast. So now they are taking all these things that they're learning from the outside of their religion and introducing it, merging it into the doctrine that Mormon members are used to following. Now remember, this is not proven scientific fact that, energy healing works. For some people, it could mentally, but it's a theory. But there's definitely nothing in the Bible that mentions, energy healing. So this is something that they've abducted, basically, and forced into a belief system that is actually developing into something we call a cult, at least from the standpoint of the true LDS members and people who, kind of look differently upon these teachings.
They use different elements and words. I didn't use those type of words. I just talked about, my relationship with Christ. And so I don't recall exactly how everybody spoke those words, but it was their attempt to help convince the spirit to leave the body.
And so to back up a little bit, when we talk about to convince the spirit to leave the body, would that be the evil spirit or the presence that had come in, or would that be the actual individual spirit?
It would be the spirit that took over that particular person's body.
Do you recall what Lori told you regarding where the original spirit from that body was?
In the beginning, it was, they would be, I believe it was they're either in the spirit world or spirit prison. I can't remember in the beginning. That's where, or they would be stuck sometimes between this world and that world. It kind of changed a lot, so I'm sorry if I'm not real accurate, but it was either they were on the other side, that they had moved on in the spirit world, or either somehow they were stuck or something like that.
And you're just fine. I'm just asking for what you recall.
Okay.
And I recognize it's been some time.
Yeah.
With regard, so what she told you, though, is the original spirit is out of the body.
Correct.
The physical body is still alive.
Correct.
And another entity or spirit is in that body.
Correct.
Do you recall what she told you regarding if the other spirit, the evil spirit, the entity is cast out of the body, what would happen to the body?
So the first time they thought they were able to cast out this first spirit that took over Charles's body, whose name was Ned. When that spirit left, so they weren't sure how it worked. And so after they believed Ned left, then they would see that Charles was still alive. And then they would come up with another idea that maybe another spirit, and then they come up with another name that spirit was the one that took over his body.
And when you say they would come up with, this wasn't something that you were told all at once then?
Oh, no.
So as time went on, teachings evolved?
Absolutely.
And you refer to when Ned leaves Charles' body, another entity or spirit comes in?
Correct.
Did they give that a name that you recall, or did Lori ever refer to that entity by any name?
Yes.
And what was that?
Then after Ned, it was Garrett, I believe. Garrett, maybe Garrett.
And then what happened with regard to Garrett?
Then he supposedly was cast out. And then after that, another one, if I think it's the final one, was something like Heblos, something like that.
And I think you said you participated in a few castings. Did you participate in any other castings regarding Charles?
Yeah, there was several with Charles, yes.
Were those castings done as new spirits would come in?
Yes.
Do you recall if Lori indicated whether or not the original spirit could ever come back into the body?
No, I don't recall that.
So again, it seems that Melenie Gibb is lying. And it is because she's afraid of what people would think versus what's the right thing to do. This is where the word zombie will be mentioned for the first time, really. And this is where you can learn hardly nothing listening to this testimony on what a zombie is.
Lori ever used the term zombie?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when she used that term?
It wasn't in the beginning, but I would say weeks after the original idea that someone taken over the body, they just started using that terminology. I would just say weeks after that.
And with that, you talked about participating in several castings on Charles. We talked about who was at the first one. Do you recall if it was the same individuals at the next casting?
There could have been different, not different people generally, but just maybe less of the group. I know that there was another lady, but I don't even remember her name anymore, but I think she was there very shortly.
Do you recall if Lori was present for all of the castings you were at?
Yeah, yes.
And was she present?
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
Do you recall if Chad was present at any of the castings?
So I might have to pause, and we will move forward on part 100 of Life Beyond the Grave, where we'll cover what Zulema had to say about the castings and a few others. No doubt that Lori is carrying this group of women, at least she thinks so. And at least the women seem to say that's the case. None of them are stepping up and say, hey, this is all my idea. We helped her come up with this. We know that Lori did ask for people's help, and people did show up when she called. But how far and deep that they were into this and how they kind of viewed the situation versus Lori, we just don't know. Love you guys. Thank you so much for your support. You can hit the like button, subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and you can share one of our girls' faces. Love you, and I'll see you guys soon.